So what can you do when you want to know more about what the Bible means when the Bible doesn't explicitly say it? Well, you dig around. That's what you do. Welcome to another installment in the Over My Shoulder Bible Study series. These little brief Bible studies typically serve to supplement the sermon that I preach each Sunday here at Missouri Street, and that's exactly what this particular video does. I'm preaching from 1 Chronicles 21 this Sunday, and early on in the chapter, we're told an amazing story where it says here in the New Revised Standard, Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count the people. And God is not pleased with this. It turns out to be sin. And so God was displeased with this thing and he struck Israel. What do you mean he struck Israel? That's the question I have in my mind whenever I read that. I want to know, how did you strike Israel, God? But we're not told, at least not explicitly. A little tip. This works not only in this verse, but in a great many passages on a number of topics throughout the entire Bible. When you find the word that has struck you or has stuck out to you that you'd like to know more about, God struck Israel, see how else that particular word is used elsewhere in the same book of the Bible. And if you want to go further, see how it's used elsewhere in similar genres of literature in the Bible. Let's stick with 1 Chronicles here. Now, it's helpful when you do this to use a more literal translation of the scripture instead of one that's more meaning for meaning. For example, I use the contemporary English version a great deal, a wonderful meaning for meaning translation of scripture. But for this particular work, it wouldn't be much help at all. It uses a variety of words, synonyms, you might say, to describe and to convey a particular point in scripture. But more literal translations, like the New Revised Standard Version, tend to use the exact same word, or very close to that, very few number of words, to describe a concept. Let's go look up the word struck elsewhere in 1 Chronicles and see how it's used. Now here's where this little video turns into homework. There are the passages. You go look them up. It's the use of the word struck in 1 Chronicles preceding chapter 21 verse 7 where we're at. And what you find when you look at all of these instances of its use, in every instance it refers to a military victory. Now, if that's the case, if that's the way this word is consistently, unanimously used in Chronicles before we get to this text, it wouldn't be too great an assumption to say that God was displeased with this thing, and so he struck Israel with a military loss. He gave Israel's enemies victory over Israel. That really fits the immediate context that follows as well. You may recall that God winds up David's seer or advisor, his prophet, Gad, to come speak to David and tell him, you've got three choices. You and Israel can experience 3 years of famine, 3 months of devastation by your foes, while the sword of your enemies overtakes you, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, pestilence on the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the territory of Israel. Now David, in his wisdom and humility, basically says, let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great, but let me not fall into human hands. You see, the context is that David and all of Israel has been struck by God. They've just experienced, if the context of the use of this word preceding follows, falling into the hands of people. Now David is saying, we've had enough of that. Your mercy is better, even if it's a severe sort of mercy. And so the rest of the story is that the Lord chooses to send 3 days of pestilence or plague, disease, and 70,000 people die as a result. Well, the whole point of this video is when you get stuck with a thought and you want to know more about it, see how else that word or phrase is used earlier in the same book of the Bible. Oftentimes, it'll give you a clue. Grace and peace be with us all.